deja vu here for those not familiar with the history of the town hall. About 90 years ago, around 1937, we had the first exhibition of Art Deco. It was not called Art Deco; it was modern. So there's a lot of deja vu in this event here, hosting it here in the town hall. 90 years, approximately 90 years since the first time this whole movement came to Mumbai. And for 10 odd days, the exhibition went on in the town hall. The entire city was introduced to art modern, and that is around when this architecture came and it kind of developed at the same time as it did elsewhere in the world as well. And today we know it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Art Deco is a World Heritage Site for us today. So with that, I request Atul to take.
Trustee of Art Deco Mumbai Trust, and I'm delighted to host this lecture here today with Mustansir and the Asiatic Society of Mumbai. Our guest today, Dr. McGowan, hardly needs any introduction. She's Professor of History and Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Vermont. She has made a tremendous contribution with academic writing on modern Bombay. Today's talk is informed by this research by her. It is an attempt to explore how the new style came to life, not just in Bombay's iconic picture palaces, but also in offices, clubs, and most importantly in our homes. A specialist in late colonial South Asia, Professor McGowan argues for a materially grounded understanding of the cultural and economic politics of this period. She brings women into the conversation on modernism, making a significant intervention in the scholarship through a study of advertising and exhibition of modern homes, which was directed at them. As Venkatesh has mentioned, and this is very important, there's a lot of historicity to this. The town hall did actually host the Abigail exhibition, as it was called, and it was hosted by the Indian Institute of Architects. And it showcased modern furnishings, interior decor, and the possibilities of multi-room homes, each with a defined use. The concept of a living room was established as a social space with a radio. The humble radio was positioned elegantly, and I quote from an advertisement in the 1937 Times of India, which read, "Entertaining people is extraordinarily simple if you have a good radio program. If you have friends for dinner, the radio will supply the background music to the cocktails, while during dessert it will give you the day's news." Life was simple. Another room with a dining table was dedicated to meals. A room with beds only for sleeping and retiring were all new ideas presented in what was called a self-contained flat. The exhibition drew huge crowds from across the city at a time when much of it was being built anew. Apartment-style living and the modern home were at the center of the discourse of this exhibition. Today we take the apartment for granted in Mumbai, but at the time of the exhibition in November 1937, it presented an unprecedented vision of city life that promised to alter the way family life and domesticity were centered. It was futuristic and marked a paradigm shift in organizing and imagining dwellings. Between the exhibition and today, a lot has changed, though we lament that the city's housing problems have only multiplied and remain largely unaddressed. There is something to be said of this historic continuity that today we host Professor McGowan, whose work places the home and domesticity at the center of history to build a picture of modern colonial Bombay at this very significant venue. Through the years, the town hall has stood witness to the trials, tribulations, and numerous conversations about the city and what we do with the spaces within it. I hope today's talk prompts us to think about the nature of design surrounding us, appreciate the homes we live in, and the lifestyle the modern style has afforded all of us. Professor McGowan will be yours. After she's finished, she'll entertain some questions, so we'll have a chance to engage with her.
Thank you. It's such a treat to be here. I started doing research as the Asiatic Society as a PhD student and have been a huge fan of the Art Deco movement and the Art Deco Trust in particular, so it's nice to bring all of these loves together. I'm particularly glad to be here again to share this as research, but also to share it as an open question of what other people know about this story, and again, what examples you have. Make me loud. Okay, good. Is that better in the back? Okay, excellent. I want to start by thinking about what we know and what we're familiar with about Art Deco. One of the things that I think the Art Deco Trust has done, but also all this great research has done, is that we're much more familiar now with the streetscapes, with the buildings, with what the architecture looks like. The architecture of curves and concrete and this amazing, amazing color. If you look at the old Victorian Gothic, again, that sense in which colored concrete was an innovation. The ways the motifs come up. And again, this is something that transforms the byways, the throughways, the major sort of roadways of Bombay, but also then moves into the suburbs and the ways in which it becomes a domestic design for bungalows, for apartment buildings, for spaces all around the city. Again, through all kinds of great work by architectural historians, Mustansir, Dalvi right in the front row here, but also many others, we know so much more about Art Deco than we used to. We know about the patrons, we know about the architects, we have this sense of what do these motifs mean, how do we read them, and also what did this style represent? Why was it embraced as a sort of cosmopolitan moment of a way of protecting British influence, but also trying to out something that was new and modern and globally focused. But again, and I think these examples are a great one, a lot of what we know stops at the door, right? We have that sense of a lot of our work is focused on the structure, it is focused on the facade. It might go inside and look at the entryways and the hallways, which are amazing, and the stairways, but it's difficult to get that sense of what it looked like inside the building, what those flats, what those spaces, what it felt like to live with Deco. And that's the thing that I'm interested in. I'm a cultural material historian who's interested in what daily life looks like, what those influences are. Again, it's not that we don't know anything what indoor Deco looks like. We have, again, thanks to great documentation at the time, images of what the early movie house interiors look like. These were photographs, these were published, these were preserved, people experienced them. So again, we have that sense of what Deco in the movie halls look like. We also have some examples of home in the sort of Rahul Mehrotra's and Sharda Dwivedi's great book on Bombay Deco. There's a couple examples from Walkener House, the much maligned and much disputed Lincoln House, that looks at the Deco interior. So again, a couple of examples. A little more recently, there was a fantastic exhibition, which you hopefully didn't miss, in 2019. The Sangamita Chatterjee put together with Chatterjee and Law, looking at Bharat tiles and how they're, again, remaking what floors are, how it informed and shaped space. Even more recently still, there's been a lot of attention to Manak Bagh in Indore. This was the palace built in the early 1930s, designed by art enthusiasts, brought in all the great European designers of the period to do furniture, to do lighting, to do interiors. And again, as a great example of what Art Deco looks like. So again, we have some examples, but they're limited, right? Nobody lived in a movie hall, or most people didn't live in a movie hall. Certainly the sense in which Lincoln House is not the model for everyday living. Certainly the sense in which just because Le Corbusier was designing chairs for, Manak Bagh, it doesn't tell us what daily life is like. So again, trying to figure out how does this style move into popular circulation? What does that look like? How does it feel on the ground is a really interesting question. And it's a challenge to figure out, right? Because interiors don't stick around, they don't last, things break, they get replaced. You have to change the fabric on that piece of furniture. My 9-year-old is a destroyer of furniture, so you may have that problem also. And things go out of style. I'm continually visiting elderly women who say, my children are trying to get rid of this thing. And I say, yes, yes, thank God you didn't. Even though I'm holding my mother off with my other hand saying, Mom, I don't want your furniture. So again, these things, they move around. And again, it's difficult to get a sense, not just of what the furniture was, but how it was put together. And what's also interesting is that we don't have good text documentation of it at the time. The Journal of Indian Institute of Architects starts in the 1930s. It, again, is showing us what modern architecture looks like. The first interior design magazine doesn't start until the 1970s. So there's this long period in which amazing stuff is happening. and it's difficult to get your hands on. Doesn't mean you can't. And so one of the things that I'm interested in is the ways you can pull together interesting sources to tell this kind of story. One of the sources I've used a lot is Advertisements. Again, Journal of Indian Institute of Architects, but also the Times of India has lots of ads for home furnishing companies, furniture makers, decorators, etc. So ads have been a really important source for me. Another thing that I've looked at and has been increasingly important to me is drawings from firms that were active at the time. Again, the top drawings from John Robertson Company, which was a big furniture decorator at the time. The bottom is an example from Kamdar Furniture, which has this amazing archive of interior designs, starting from the 40s, as well as photographs and this amazing thing. So thank you, Vikram Kamdar, who's here tonight. The other thing that I've been increasingly able to do, in part through talks like this, is go and visit Art Deco homes, places where furniture is still there, in somewhat the same constellation that you might have, and in somewhat the same condition. It turns out property disputes are really useful for me because that means you don't redecorate very often because you can't agree who owns it. So being able to go into spaces where either people have been able to preserve their own space or they're fighting with their siblings or others and therefore aren't changing what's in that space. And then the last example is the example that we're all going to come back to, which is the Ideal Home exhibition. And one of the things the Ideal Home exhibition does is it documents and gives a sense of both what the ideals of this moment were, and again, published in the Journal of the Indian Institute of Architects, but also who the people were who were responsible. Who are the firms? What are they doing? How are they coming together in combination? So again, it doesn't give us the complete story. It's always tough to tell. Did anybody actually bring this home, or did they just leave it in the exhibition space? But it starts to give us a way to tell the story. Of course, the question is, why do we need to tell the story? As a historian, the idea that we don't know, there's lots of things we don't know, and probably we never need to know, and that's fine. But I would argue we need to know, and it's worth knowing this story of indoor deco for a couple reasons. One is because this is what it felt like, right? So if we're thinking about deco as central to the history of Bombay, get into the experience of what was it like to live with this? What was it like to interact with it? What was it like to come into contact with it at every level? Again, the Art Deco Trust has done amazing work documenting buildings. We know Art Deco is all through this city. If you spend any time in Trocazar, if you spend any time in great furniture companies around the city, we know Art Deco furniture was all over the place. How did they come together? What did that mean? How did they inform one another? How do we bring them into conversation? So again, one reason why we need to know it is because it actually fills out our sense of the architecture. The second, of course, is that this is a style that we think of as defining Bombay, essential to the idea of modern Bombay in the interwar period. And so again, if we want to get that vision of what this burgeoning cosmopolitan place looks like, I want to think about the material basis of that. But the interesting questions, and for all the design students here, is two interesting things to me about Deco is that it inaugurates a new conversation about design that we did not have before. So suddenly, in the 1920s, and then particularly in the 1930s, design moves into the public sphere. It moves into public conversation. It moves into print. It moves into public exhibition. We simply didn't have before, partly because of print technology, also partly because of the distribution of different kinds of journals and things. So the idea that there is a public discussion and there's public trends that can be traced, and that I can decide I love your house because I saw it in an ad, or I saw a picture of that same chair in some kind of print publication. I don't have to go to your house to know that style is out there, right? So before, I would have to go to Esplanade House to figure out what high style looked like. And they weren't going to let me in, right? So now we can all get access to it in new kinds of ways. And then the final reason why this is a really useful moment to think about is because it inaugurates professional interior designers. You start getting people who say and advertise for themselves as interior designers. Architecture itself is a new profession still in this era, but interior design as something that is separate and distinct and valuable and valued is also emerging. So again, it helps you both think about a new kind of public culture in which design is discussed and argued about, but it also thinks about the ways in which design practice is emerging in Bombay. Bombay not just as a site of architectural, sort of beginnings of architectural education, but of design as a practice. And again, putting that history of design in India back into Bombay. Okay, so I'm not sure I'm going to deliver on all of that. What did indoor deco feel like? How did it define the city? How did it transform public conversations about design? And how did the new style transform design practice? But I'll do what I can. First, though, most basically, what is this stuff? What am I talking about when I say design, Art Deco design? And again, later term, we're replying back to the creature. A lot of what we think of as Art Deco design is things that you might find in, again, antique stores or otherwise. Teak furniture, rounded edges, interesting combinations, smooth surfaces, not a lot of surface ornamentation in terms of carving or spindles or these kinds of things. So swooping lines, clean surfaces, teak, etc. And again, you see this in the ads of this period, that sort of distinctive curved armchair, but also the backs on certain kind of chairs. So again, I'm less interested in defining the contours of that's deco and that's not deco than helping us give a flavor of it. But I think it's also really important to remember that deco interiors was much more than this kind of particular teak furniture we're familiar with. Some of that is because it's experimenting with new materials in furniture. So in this example, there we go. Notice the ways that the veneers are working here and the use of veneers and the sort of modernity of the veneers. There's a sort of layering patterning on the left and different kinds of panels put together there. That use of veneers is totally endemic in this time, and again, really evocative of the investment in sort of sleek surfaces, etc. But again, it's not just wood, right? It's definitely this investment in steel. This is the moment when Godrej steel furniture takes off and becomes popular. Lots of other competitors. Modera was making stuff that was here in Town Hall for the Ideal Home exhibition. And this idea that steel then becomes a useful, very modern, evoking the sort of spirit of the day, material for furnishings of the time. And again, usually the conversation about Art Deco stops at furniture, and I want us to push past that to think about other things. Obviously, the most central material of Art Deco is concrete, right? If we want to know what the success was of Art Deco, it was that they paved the world, right? And that sense that concrete becomes inevitable and becomes the building material of all things, in part because of its amazing creative possibilities, but also because it's more affordable, etc. But it's not just concrete as a structural material that's interesting. It's obviously, and again, these are from that great exhibition, it's the ways you can use colored concrete to make patterns and flooring and tiling, etc. in different ways. It's also all kind of materials that we don't necessarily value quite as much anymore. Masonite as the, which is essentially a version of plywood, as again, the sort of transformative modern material. And notice how it's being used both to sort of line stairways, but also then to make these amazing sort of wall decorations, etc. So seen as a way to bring paneling in without having the expensive wood, holds up, it's more stable, etc. Very modern material at this time. Also new materials in paint, new paint qualities, new paint surfaces that were shinier, more permanent, more resistant to wear and tear, or at least in theory. But notice also that it's not just that the walls, and again, black and white pictures are terrible for getting a sense of what were the colors here. But notice it's not just color, the sort of surface they're doing, they're also doing wall decoration. And this idea that you get in a lot of sort of deco design of having paintings that are done on the walls, that you're not going to leave it up to people to hang their own decoration, you're going to build it into your structure in that sense. So again, painting, surface decoration, plastering as its own art form of this period. Certainly the idea of etched glass and the ways you can put pattern into the structure with glass materials. So again, new materials coming into construction in addition to the furniture, but then obviously new technologies. And again, the lift is the thing we think most centrally, right? Having an elevator makes the possibility of multi-story apartments way more appealing for many of us, and the deco designs around them are gorgeous. But thinking about, of course, the lift requires electricity, and the fact that deco is the first design in India that is built around electricity. And this room is actually a great example. There's electricity in here, but this room was not designed for it, right? It's added in, and it's these sort of long pendants that are not related to or integral to the way you might think of this as space. Versus deco designs where the electricity becomes a key element of how you're expressing the design and the pattern. In this, I'm a terrible photographer, I really apologize for that. This Table actually has an inset light right in the middle. This hanging light over here is this very dark thing here. These are walls. This is in the side walls. This is out in the hall. All brought in, imported from Europe, all done as, again, attempt to create a distinctive, integrated whole that puts electricity at the center, right? It's not saying, well, yes, we should light it later. It makes it a central element in the design. Certainly by the 40s, you start to get the sense in which electricity is a much more active design element. These inset lighting units that are recessed in the panel to center the room, to be its own highlight, but also to bring lighting in an indirect way right into the heart. Very different from this kind of chandelier stuff we have in this kind of room here. So again, electricity is central to the design. The sense in which your modern building then sort of trumpets itself as being about these technologies. Durbar Hall, one of the sort of great new buildings of the 1930s, the most fabulous block of flats we have in the city. The advertisements in the Times on the, celebrating the opening are all about every flat has a refrigerator. Here's the 300 ceiling fans that we've installed. You can have gas cooking in every unit. So the idea that your modern building is defined by access to, engagement with, and integration of new kinds of technology. The radio is another great example. Again, that great quote that Atul read about having a radio in the room, having that be part of your experience of the space, whatever variety you want, whatever kind. And then the last one that's coming in, and coming in slightly more slowly, is the telephone. I just found this ad recently and I love it. I did the inset on the left so you can read it. And you can't read it very well, but it essentially says, if you have a telephone, you're more popular because people will invite you over. If you have a telephone, you will also have an excuse when you're bored. You're very sad, you're bored at home. You call your friends, invite them over, and they can come over and you can listen to the radio, right? And so that sense in which the technology becomes a definition of what it means to have a good phone. Get a telephone of your own. There's great ads at this time being like, nobody likes you because you don't have a phone. It's really, really straightforward advertisement. One of the crucial things, and this ad is a great example, is these work together, right? You have a telephone to come invite people to listen to the radio. It's not that you paint the wall and you plaster and you put up a mural. It's not just that you have a light, you're going to tailor the lighting to the furniture. It's not just that you move into the Durbar Hall, which is this fabulous new architectural space, but now you will have a refrigerator. Again, thinking about them as combinations. And again, the spaces then dictate how people use it, and then people adapt what they're going to do in a space based on the building, right? This is a great example. Again, this is from a building on the Maidan. And there's no other place you can put that table, right? Those tiles tell you exactly where the table is going to go in that room. And it's gorgeous and awesome, unless you had a round table, and then it might not be so great, right? So it didictates in certain ways what you're going to do with your space. You can choose to ignore it, and you might be fighting with it. It also might choose it in different ways. So, a great rounded, sort of one of these great rounded, I'm sorry, Mustansir, I have no architectural terminology, whatever, a rounded end to the building, we're just going to call it. Again, doesn't dictate the use of the space, but the fact that it has this rounded desk in it with the chair, and it has this sort of curved side tables on the bed, you can see how the space is then shaping the choices you might make. It's not necessary, it doesn't fit into that space, it's not sort of crafted for that space, but it responds to that space. And so the idea that, again, space is going to encourage you to go certain directions in what kinds of furniture you bring, what kinds of things you do with it, but also then the styles that you're going to do. Again, another example that this sort of, the geometry of the railing then comes out in these great triangular tables and the circle of that line there. Again, that sense of the intersection and the interplay between architecture and what you bring inside. Obviously, the ideal then is to do the whole thing, do it all together, make it an incredibly integrated whole. And that's really what a lot of these ads speak to. So you get ads for individual pieces of furniture, but a lot of the ads show you how to put it all together and what the complete whole would be. So again, it's not just the couch, it's the couch with the fabric behind it and this side table. And that's a great one. The text of it essentially says, your architect knows better than you, don't make your decisions on your own, right? So there's a lot of this language going on, being like, you're gonna screw it up, please let me tell you. The sense that in this one over here for the Army and Navy stores, the furniture is teeny, right? The thing that they're technically selling is the furniture, but they're also selling that they are furnishers and decorators. So you can buy the drapes, you can get the paint done, you can get the plaster work done, etc. And again, Kamdar as an example here of being able to do the paneling and the inbuilt and the freestanding furniture all at the same time. And again, that's the principle of the Ideal Home exhibition. Here's the map of what it was supposed to be. It actually apparently diverged from this a little bit. But essentially what it did was to set up a whole bunch of model rooms showing you not just here's a dining room set, but here's how to do it all together, right? Here's what the cushion should look like. Here's what you should put on your walls. There's lighting in every room, the sort of mural painted above the bed, the idea of that plaster work, the inset there to make the sort of rounded walls. It was definitely arguing that you needed to think about the whole, and you needed to think about how to bring it all together. And you needed to think about the total aesthetic that you're gonna do from all of that, while also firmly investing in the idea, and again, the designers of this time say this directly, don't do this on your own, children. It's not safe in your hands. It's an ad by E.F. Messerschmitt. He's the German designer who comes over front with the patterns and all of the materials to do the installation of the Manikbag Palace. So he is in Indore for the installation of that palace for 3 years and moves to Bombay and sets up shop as an interior decorator. And again, the message is interior decoration is not merely the splashing of paint and color on the walls, nor the crowding of rooms with odd pieces of furniture. In a modern scheme of decoration, lights, fabrics, carpets, ornaments, furniture, wall treatments, floor and ceilings must all harmonize. Again, don't do this yourself, kids. So that idea of the holistic integration to make sure that somebody has an eye for color, pattern, texture, material, and again, the sort of all the pieces that go into it. Messerschmitt starts off on his own. He actually ends up joining Kamdar after the war. And so we have some of his examples of the work that he did that is still there, but also the drawings that he did for them. This is one of my favorites. So this is an inbuilt sort of china cabinet on the side, but there's a light here that allows you to light this mural that he did of the Pratapgarh fort. And then there's lighting behind it also. This is all sort of a recessed inlay. And again, the round table and the chairs are there, all of which respond to this space. So again, the idea that if you give the decorator full reign, they're gonna do the lighting, they're gonna do the color, they're gonna do the furniture, they're gonna do the inbuilt for you. Another example also from the late 1940s in which you can see, again, this was that ceiling panel I showed you before. There's, again, another mural he did here, lighting. There's lighting of this here. There's lighting up top here. The floor is this fabulous marble inlay. And again, the furniture is all inbuilt. So if you give the decorator full hand, they will do a complete interior for you. Seems totally normal to us now, right? This is what decorators do. They tell you all the stuff you own is terrible, we should start over and we should give you free reign. But again, that sense in which this was something that people were going to do and do it broadly is a novel moment. My favorite example of this is an example that Atul and I visited together, in which you get, again, one of these great curved frontages of a building, which then does the inbuilt. So, you know, again, this is a place in which your normal rectangular couches wouldn't do a lot of good, so the couches get inbuilt. But I want you to notice this thing right here, because this is a sort of complicated angle, right, in which then the sideboard gets built in and then it sort of sits right at the edge of that couch. So the lighting is done, the furniture is built in, all of the supports are done, and it responds as a whole. So again, that ideal in which the Art Deco interior attempted at totality, it aspired to comprehensive, it aspired to, again, pull it all together into one careful thing. And again, it's useful to step back and ask how did they get away with it, right? How did they manage to convince people to start over and let them have free reign? And part of that answer is because Bombay is so new in the 1930s. These buildings are brand new. People are moving into flats with 4 bedrooms, with 3 bedrooms, in places in which they simply don't have enough stuff to fill it. And so there's a lot of new furniture being bought to fill the new buildings, and there's a sense in which this is a massive project and we should hand it over. So some of it is, again, the newness of it. Some of it is the visual innovation, right? You have these rounded spaces that don't really work with earlier styles or other things. So again, the visual innovations are going to put constraints on what you're going to do. The technical innovations, if now you have lighting and you have a telephone and you have these other things, you need a space that can respond to it. You need somebody who can do that. The social innovations, and again, this gets back to Atul's thing about coming over and having people come and listen to the radio with you, the sense in which you're starting to have dinner parties as sociability, and you're starting to have card parties. It's great. Like, doesn't everybody want a drink holder on the side of their table to keep the glass off the table? The ways in which you need furniture to match these new practices and to enable these new kinds of things, and you need the spaces for it. But again, also the human mobility, the fact that so many people in the city are new to Bombay. So all the palaces, all the buildings that the Maharajas are building, they have another palace, they often have more than one. And this is a brand new building which needs to, they're not going to bring the stuff from Montpellier, they're not going to bring the stuff from Kutch in order to fill it. So it gives you that canvas. And again, it's always worth remembering we're all new to the city in a certain way. And so again, as coming and shedding the old and embracing the new, some of that takes on this material form. Okay, so I'm going to run out of time soon, but I'll keep going. If that's the style and its a component, there's a really important question to ask here, which is, so what, right? I've given you examples of very wealthy families. If 200 families use this style and it characterized only the Maharajas and it only characterized the top industrialist families, I'm not sure I would be that interested. What's interesting to me about Deco is how it becomes popular, how it becomes Bombay, how it becomes widespread in all of that sense. And again, this is where I want you to think about the sources that I'm using. The beauty of ads is that they go out into the world and you can do different things about them. You could say, oh, I need to go to John Roberts because I want my furniture in the modern style. Or might you say, heck with John Roberts, I'm going to cut that out of the paper, I'm going to bring it to the guy down the street and he's going to build it for you, right? And so once it's in print, once you have this enormous variety of things and ideas and different inspirations, you can think about all the different ways that you can do it. And again, the ads give me a really limited sense of who the major players are, right? I know about John Roberts, I know about Mackenzie's, I know about Kamdar, I know about Army and Navy. But if you go to Durbar Bazaar, if you go to the antique stores, there's all kinds of furniture labels that we have no idea what they're from. We don't know where they were from. And they're making it in Nasik, and they're making it in Ahmedabad, and they're making it in all different kinds of places. So again, that sense in which print allows the popularization of film. But of course, print is limited. What's really important is movies. And if you just go through Film India and look at the sort of stills from different magazines, they're all using this stuff. This is why this becomes the style of the modern, is because, again, you get the sort of steel furniture here, you get that swooping armchair here and here, you get the little round tables here, and it's moving out into the wider world, and it's coming out as the definition of cosmopolitan and modern and swank and racy and all the other things. And so, again, if we think about the ways in which, through film, through print, through popular exhibitions, you have the chance to see more about this style than you ever would have had before. Because again, nobody was inviting me over to Esplanade House. Nobody was probably inviting most people into the places where the sort of earlier styles were active. This gives us access in a popular way. It also then starts to sort of move out into a whole range of other people. So you get a whole bunch of ads that come out in the 30s of people like, yeah, we know you can't afford Gandhar. We know you also can't afford Army and Navy store. Don't worry, you can afford it too. You can buy it on layaway. Our prices are cheaper than you think. Come talk to us, we'll make a deal, right? So again, that sense of trying to make it a form that was affordable. And again, this is where I think Godrej is a great example of thinking about modern style, not as the elite that's going to stay just in a rarefied environment, but building it on mass scale. In furniture, it's not done by one manufacturer, it's done by many. But in steel, again, Alwyn, Moderna, and Godrej, they set out to transform how people live through mass production and all of those things. So again, these are ideas that move, these are ideas that travel, and again, if I'm going to make an argument about why this matters, it's because it helps us think about a public culture of design in which people are seeing and commenting, and seen people commenting, right? So this is very much teaching you, being like, oh, I'm supposed to comment on your furniture. Let me talk about your furniture, right? So it's teaching us how to engage with design, what we're supposed to want, what we're supposed to aspire to. Doesn't mean we all bought it. It's just like, if we read Architectural Digest now, most of us don't actually buy this stuff in there, but we see it and think about it, we talk about it, and it might inform our choices in one way or the other. So again, there's a way in which Art Deco helps us think about the emergence of conversations about design. It helps us think about the emergence of professional designers who are coming in and asking questions and then offering interventions that say, there's a skill here, there's an expertise here, there's a professional training here that is relevant. The other thing that it does to the city is it then spawns and sort of inspires all of this innovation in the production sense. And I think that sense of the economic history of the city as being about workshops, and being about fitters, and being about people who come in and doing the plastering, that small scale industry also then creates a vibrant economy in a really interesting way, coming out of the Depression, coming out of the ways in which the economy is changing during the wars. So again, I think the indoor deco is interesting to think about how people lived in these spaces, how the building shaped what people did, and how what they did inside them worked with or against buildings, how the new technologies came into the home, what it did in terms of the way you lived, the practices you had, the things you had around them, but also then again how it starts to define a modernism and a modern design. And again, this is where we think of, or maybe it's just me, but the history of design is often told for India as it all starts in Ahmedabad, and thank God there's NID, and then we move on from there. This is the history of design, right? This is the history of modernism before Le Corbusier, before Louis Kahn, before the sort of Ray Charles Eames come and do that. And thinking about how we define it, not just as a couple stars, but through Apollo Furnishing Company, through, again, an electrical fitter, William Jack's paints, etc. All of whom are trying to work out what the details we're looking at. And that embodied design, that diffused design, as well as that investment in the idea that design is a matter that we should talk about and that we should have opinions about and that you can love or you can hate. That birth of design, I think we need to root in the sort of Art Deco moment and in the interior in particular. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I talk very fast. I would love to take questions, comments, anything people have to add from there.
So how does the deco movement impact the design of bathrooms and toilets in privates? Because in pre-modern or even European pre-modern or Indian pre-modern, the private was always a problem. It was a hygiene issue. And how does this get integrated in the deco movement?
The bathroom is the place of the modern in the house. In part because again, everything is brand new. The idea of having a bathtub, the idea of having fixed fittings, the idea that you might not just need, a sink and a toilet, or but then you also need fittings, and you need shaving mirrors, and you need, stools and towel rods, etc. So you get all these great bathroom showrooms that come up in Bombay, which is an us and others do them. That again set off to say, we're not just going to show you a sink, we're going to show you a complete suite, because we're not sure you're going to do it right on your own. And so they put it all together, and the colors are amazing. And so they have these color ads. The Times of India Annual has really great ads for bathrooms in this period, in which the hot pink sink was really all the rage. Recommended. But again, so that sense in which color was really central, the idea of tiling everything, but the idea of, again, furnishing. The Times of India has this great feature called the Beautiful Homes pages that starts in 1934. And so, they would rotate, 1 week it would be on the drawing room, then it would be on the bedroom, and then they would have regular features on the bathroom. And so again, you can track the changing trends and also the who's investing in it and who are the main retailers. So you get the tile makers, the bathroom fixture people, and other things. So it's a really important moment for all of us. Yeah, thanks.
I was interested to know about interior design as a modernizing project. How did that interact with the local political context? So when we talk about the colonial context or the caste or gender norms. So could you maybe tell us a bit about that?
I think one of the things that's interesting to me about this as a moment in terms of the gender politics is that a lot of the advice that's coming out of this time is really aimed at women. And you're like, your home should reflect your personality. Which on the one hand, sort of gives women the autonomy to say women are in charge of decorating things. It also then takes it away immediately by saying, don't forget to talk to your husband because it's a really expensive choice and he's going to want to make the final decision. So again, it sort of goes back and forth in those two things. In terms of cast, one of the things that's happening in a lot of these designs, and again, this gets back to the location of the bathroom, is that and Nicola Rao has written really great stuff about this, the ways in which the modern is considered entirely compatible with cast hierarchies and cast restrictions. And again, you want to have separate entrances for your sweepers. You want to make sure the bathroom is accessible from a separate door. And so the sense in which this as the modern also reinforces and sort of supports different kinds of cast hierarchies and different things.
I have a million questions, but I'll stick to two.
Okay.
One, what was the role of wallpaper? And two, this movement also brought the attached bathroom cum toilet to the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
So was there a lot of opposition to having your toilet and your bathroom together and attached to your bedroom? Because that's not a very Indian thing. The back of the house was where the toilets were.
Yeah.
So how did that empower in its own way?
Yeah. Wallpaper, there's a lot of conversation about wallpaper and about how it sort of peels right off and it's a terrible idea and you should do other things with it. So one of the reasons why there's a sort of constant conversation about masonite or different kinds of plastering techniques or different kinds of painting techniques is because there's a sense in which, the British assume you should wallpaper everything, right? But it wasn't working particularly well, and it wasn't an effect that ended up working well. What's interesting to me, I think, is maybe the ways in which that means patterning on walls doesn't become a big part of this as a movement. Whereas again, these floors are wild and crazy, and how do you possibly live? What do you do? How do you decorate around that? But again, the walls are plain, and that's in part because the techniques for patterning them in color or in pattern, wallpaper is not effective in monsoonal conditions in this period. What was your second question? Oh, the bathroom in the bedroom. Yes, and that is super controversial, and there's a lot of the architects that's coming out that says that builds very specifically so you don't have it attached to. It's next to, it's proximate to, but always accessible from some other place. So it's starting this way, and again, Nicola Rao's argument is that moving the bathroom inside the house is the first big thing. Moving it into the bedroom and not accessible just from outside. That's actually a sort of later development. You start to see it, but it's still not incredibly common. And again, the difference sometimes is buildings that are oriented towards or assuming a European tendency might do one thing, and buildings that are assuming an Indian tendency might do something else. So it's a strategy that's in transition.
I now invite Professor Mustansir, our trustee, to give the summation of the book.
More than a summation, I would just like to make a couple of observations based on some of the queries which emerge and so on. The first is the notion and the idea of cosmopolitanism, which is something that I think is pretty much a central feature of the architectural environment of this particular period, and that emerges, just to give an example, out of this new kind of building which is called the apartment block. The apartment block starts to come into its own during the 30s and the 40s, and from that point onwards to this very day, that seems to be a standard. Living in flats. But living in flats has a very, very interesting consequence to what came before that. And that is that probably for the first time, living in flats means that you are living next door to somebody who is entirely unlike you. Okay? They may be more or less of the same economic class, I suppose, but they are entirely unlike you in a variety of other habits, whether that is caste or religion or eating habits or other cultural backgrounds and so on, and you have to all live together. Art Deco is probably the one kind of architectural style that has been continuously occupied for the last 80 years. And two things happen because of that. One is that when it comes to the more public buildings, things change over a period of time. And when it comes to the apartment block, you have no access to it. So you really don't get to see much And thanks to Abigail, we are now getting to see some of that, and therefore the conversation on what happens within Art Deco buildings is now accessible to us, and we can talk so much about it. So thank you once again for giving us all these unique images which we haven't exactly seen before, and of course all your insights into something that I think a lot more exploration needs to be done.